Super Lucky Disaster Man. Chapter 81 Special Division's Iron Fist. In the Port Mafia headquarters, in the boss's office, Mori Ogai looked at the letter Natsume-sensei had sent him. His instincts told him it probably wasn't anything good. But he couldn't not read it. After all, for Natsume Soseki-sensei, who had always maintained a hands-off approach, to write him a letter, it must not be a small matter. Well, not necessarily. Last time the entire letter was focused on Komaeda Nagito, and it had only been a year since then. He hadn't forgotten it. Mori Ogai braced himself, both mentally and emotionally, as he cautiously opened the envelope and took out the paper inside. One could only say, Natsume-sensei truly lived up to being Natsume-sensei. Every time, there was always a surprise. This time, the letter inside wasn't even written by Natsume-sensei. The corners of Mori Ogai's mouth twitched as he read the familiar content, although he had only seen it once before and had someone else handle it afterward. Now that he saw it again, he immediately remembered, wasn't this Oda Sakanosuke's resignation letter? Why was Oda Sakanosuke's resignation letter included in a letter sent to him by Natsume-sensei? Mori Ogai felt utterly baffled, even suspecting that Natsume-sensei was deliberately working against him. How was it that whenever he thought of scheming against someone, it would somehow involve Natsume-sensei? Did Natsume-sensei perhaps dislike him? Mori Ogai carefully read the resignation letter. He had only read the first line of previously, reaching the same conclusion as last time. There was no message or hidden code from Natsume-sensei for him. In the end, he could only call in his subordinate, who was waiting outside for his orders at any moment. Go and bring Oda Sakanosuke to me. Recently, Oda Sakanosuke had been hanging around Dazai-Osamu quite a lot, unlike before when he used to intentionally keep his distance during work hours. He even helped capture the leader's silver hand 2 days ago, which was quite impressive. So, finding him wouldn't lead to a reply like, "Who is Oda Sakanosuke?" anymore. Thus, very quickly, Oda Sakanosuke arrived at the boss's office. Mori Ogai said nothing, simply pushed the letter on the desk toward Oda Sakanosuke. "Oda-kun, have a look at this." After saying, "Excuse me," Oda Sakanosuke stepped forward, lowered his head, and looked. "Did I make a mistake in writing?" Mori Ogai felt a mix of emotions and silently cursed in his heart. Is this the point? Before continuing, "Oda-kun, I can approve your resignation, but before that, I have a question I'd like you to answer." "Please go ahead." Mori Ogai clasped his fingers together and looked deeply at Oda Sakanosuke from above his hands. "Do you know Natsume Soseki?" "Yes." On this point, Natsume Soseki had long instructed Oda Sakanosuke on whom he could tell and whom he couldn't. "He can be considered my teacher who taught me how to write." Mori Ogai bowed his head, his expression covered in shadow. "Boss? It's nothing." Mori Ogai's tone carried a subtle hint of exhaustion, as he casually wrote a note for Oda Sakanosuke. "Take this to process your resignation." "Natsume-sensei. Just how many disciples do you have?" Misunderstanding that Oda Sakanosuke was also a disciple of Natsume Soseki, Mori Ogai felt immense pain. "Sensei, I know you like picking up diamonds, but you can't just take them away from my hands. I really need people here." Even though he said that, Mori Ogai felt a bit guilty. After all, this diamond, Oda Sakanosuke, was placed in his hands, and he had planned to use him to exchange for the skilled business permit by sacrificing him, a disposable use. He could imagine Natsume-sensei would definitely be displeased with this kind of treatment. Now that the mimic incident had been resolved, Natsume-sensei helping Oda Sakanosuke resign was already giving him a lot of face. Moreover, Dazai-Osamu and Oda Sakanosuke were friends, and Dazai-Osamu had probably realized his scheme against Oda Sakanosuke. Keeping Oda Sakanosuke in the Port Mafia forcibly was unnecessary. It was time to let go. Regardless, even though the process and his plans were completely different from what he intended, he still got the skilled business permit in hand. These little details didn't matter. He didn't mind playing the nice guy. At this moment, the phone on Mori Ogai's desk rang, and when he answered, it turned out to be Sakaguchi Ongo. Oh, Ongo-kun, I didn't expect you'd still contact me. Mori Ogai naturally wasn't too pleased with the undercover agent, and his tone carried a hint of sarcasm. After all, he had long seen through Ongo's role as an infiltrator and used him to achieve his goals. Did his dislike for informers have any real impact? Not at all. Mori-san. Sakaguchi Ongo's tone was rather subtle, but Mori Ogai paid no attention, assuming it was the usual complex emotions an informant would feel toward their original employer. But very soon, Mori Ogai understood why Sakaguchi Ongo's tone was so nuanced. About the skilled business permit. Repeat that. Upon hearing this, Mori Ogai suddenly sat upright, and in a low, pressured tone, softly said, "Just now you mentioned the skilled business permit. What about it?" Deep inside, Sakaguchi Ongo felt a bit of schadenfreude, but he couldn't show it. He could only turn his emotions into the same subtle tone Mori Ogai had just ignored, and repeat. The skilled business permit, although it has been issued to the Port Mafia, the validity period of the certificate will be based on the registration time within the government. Currently, the Port Mafia is still in the observation period. Simply put, the government hadn't registered it, and the skilled business permit Mori Ogai had was just a useless piece of paper. It was entirely a case of, the final right to interpretation rests with the government. This is different from what we initially agreed upon. Mori Ogai's voice was filled with chilling coldness as he spoke. To obtain the skilled business permit, I agreed to two conditions. One was not to pursue Ongo-kun's responsibility, and the other was to destroy the illegal ability criminal organization Mimic. The Port Mafia has undoubtedly fulfilled both of these conditions. The first condition is naturally not an issue. As the person involved, I can testify on behalf of the Port Mafia. After receiving orders to inform Mori Ogai of the bad news, Sakaguchi Ongo had no negative emotions whatsoever, not even showing any signs of sleep deprivation. But as for the second condition, did the Port Mafia really fulfill it? Mori Ogai frowned, silent. He knew well that the mimic matter couldn't be attributed to the Port Mafia's achievements. It could either be seen as an act of God or credited to Komaeda Nagito. Either way, it had nothing to do with the Port Mafia. Previously, when he was alone, he could at least consider Komaeda Nagito as part of the Port Mafia, but that was just self-deception. If the Special Division really wanted to question it, that reasoning was nothing more than a joke. Originally, he thought, as long as the skilled business permit was in hand, the outcome was the same, the process didn't matter, and the government wouldn't make a fuss. He hadn't expected they'd play such a trick, determining the registration time as the key. Of course, he could ignore this entirely, simply brandishing the permit on the streets, but offending the Special Division wasn't a wise choice. For someone like Mori Ogai, who preferred optimal solutions, this would be a last resort. However, Mori Ogai was quite puzzled, not understanding why the Special Division was being so stubborn this time. Such a decision clearly would offend him, yet they still called him to state it so righteously. Ongo-kun. Mori Ogai thought for a moment and then asked seriously, even if the Port Mafia did not make the final move, we did pay a significant price. Is the Special Division planning to negate all contributions of the Port Mafia? Please don't misunderstand. Representing the government's standpoint, Sakaguchi Ongo calmly explained, we do see the efforts the Port Mafia made, and this observation period is not long at all, approximately half a year, before the certificate in your hand will be officially registered. Mori Ogai's heart relaxed. Half a year sounded like merely the time to complete some procedural formalities. Given the reduced workload for the Port Mafia in eliminating Mimic, having the Special Division also take a step back seemed like just a warning. Otherwise, if the Port Mafia had been allowed to go through without a hitch this time, they might still try to leverage the Special Division in the future, scheming for other benefits. Extending it by half a year seemed like a reasonable warning. Having already prepared for the worst, Mori Ogai was now much more relaxed. He casually asked, is this Director Taneda's decision? No, it is the decision of a certain advisor. Mori Ogai raised his eyebrows, a bit surprised. Oh, may I know which advisor? It was clearly one of those things he wanted to remember down to the smallest detail, and Mori Ogai didn't expect to get an answer from Sakaguchi Ango. He just asked with a normal, it won't hurt to ask, attitude. Unexpectedly, Sakaguchi Ango actually answered. It was a certain Natsume advisor. He said to tell you this, and you'd understand. Mori Ogai. Asking a question won't kill a person, but his heart is already dead. Sensei. Natsume Sensei. You really are such a great teacher to me. Can you not be a bit kinder to me? Hanging up the phone, Mori Ogai couldn't calm down for a long time. Although, at that time, he did intend to give away Komaeda-kuen's address, it wasn't as if he had sold him out, and yet Mimic found their way there on their own. This wasn't really his fault, was it? Telling Komaeda-kuen to go to the mountains wasn't something he instigated either, and Komaeda Nagito almost died. Couldn't that be blamed on someone else? Or maybe it wasn't because of Komaeda-kuen but because of Oda Sakanosuke. Even though he knew the port mafia was taking advantage of the situation this time, never mind delaying for half a year, even delaying for an entire year was acceptable. Since the person making the suggestion was Natsume-sensei, Mori Ogai was rather distressed. Rationally, Mori Ogai knew there was nothing wrong with this suggestion. It was a great move to maintain the special division's status, show off the government's power, and subtly remind the port mafia not to get too arrogant. If the positions were reversed, he would have made a similar suggestion to suppress the port mafia's growing influence. But emotionally, why did it have to be Natsume-sensei? Aren't you too impartial? Have you forgotten I'm also your disciple? Not only did you refuse to open a back door for me, but you also stood firmly with the government and pulled me back. Isn't that just a bit too unfair? And it's not just that you did it, you also went out of your way to hint at Sakaguchi Ango's identity. It's clear that you're somewhat dissatisfied with me, isn't it? Perhaps it wasn't just because of Komaeda-kuen and Oda Sakanosuke, but also because of things that had accumulated over time, like the time he and Fukuzawa Yukichi fought over Akiko, leading to them cutting ties. In retrospect, he had indeed done quite a few things that would earn disapproval from Natsume-sensei. After all, as time passed, people changed. He believed there was no issue, but sensei might see him as having gone astray. Natsume-sensei only extended the validity period for the skilled business permit for another 6 months. This was already a gentle warning. Otherwise, with Natsume-sensei's character, if he overstepped, as long as it didn't threaten Yokohama, sensei wouldn't necessarily intervene. Does that mean Natsume-sensei has always been watching him? And actually cares about him? Mori Ogai, who often felt like the forgotten second disciple, oddly found himself feeling happy after being figuratively smacked by Natsume-sensei's iron fist from afar. Just as Natsume Soseki thought, Mori Ogai, who enjoyed thinking himself clever, didn't end up harboring long-lasting negative feelings over this matter. Instead, it pushed him back into a contemplative state. After all, he was still Natsume Soseki's disciple. Although Natsume Soseki had always been hands-off, compared to Fukuzawa Yukichi, he actually worried more about Mori Ogai, using this opportunity to wake him up. Take, for instance, wanting to use the mimic incident to expel Dazai Osamu, Natsume Soseki really couldn't approve of that. He felt that sooner or later Mori Ogai would regret it. In the end, on this day, Mori Ogai merely lamented. First, Oda Sakanosuke had abruptly resigned, and then the skilled business permit would take over half a year before it could be used. His luck was truly terrible. If Yakuran Gesso knew about this, he would surely express his disbelief from afar. You really have the nerve to say your luck is bad? Didn't you just get rid of someone who used to do menial work at the bottom? The skilled business permit wasn't even rejected. Normally, it takes 6 months just for the government to process it and issue the certificate. If not for Mimic's actions, how could they have just given it to you like that? Besides, Mimic's very presence in Japan was orchestrated by you, you profited from it and still had the audacity to brag. He is what they'd called bad luck, okay? First, he almost choked to death on cotton candy, resulting in a psychological shadow over his favorite cotton candy. Then, he was forcibly given CPR by a ripped guy in tight clothes when it wasn't even necessary, which only added yet another psychological scar. The only solace is that after being so unlucky, it feels like it cancels out the incident involving Komaeda-kun, so he doesn't need to go to the sanatorium. However, although Yakuran Gesso wasn't entirely sure what Mori Ogai had gone through, he was very interested in Dostoevsky, wanting to understand every detail clearly. Through considerable effort, he finally got a definitive answer. Dostoevsky had indeed entered Masalt and had even been there for a few days already. Yakuran Gesso found this very puzzling. Where are the accomplices? How could they let Dostoevsky enter Masalt without stopping him? Are they crazy, or dead? Ivan Goncharov, of course, wasn't dead. Lately, he had been evading his own arrest, but that didn't hinder his devotion to Dostoevsky. If Dostoevsky needed him, he would give his life without hesitation. How could he refuse to show up just because of his lowly wanted status? There was another reason he hadn't gone to rescue Dostoevsky. That is, Ivan Goncharov believed that this might actually be Dostoevsky's plan. Otherwise, how could it be so coincidental? On the day the building collapsed, his master had sent him elsewhere on another task. If he had been there, he could have used his ability to manipulate earth and stone to protect his master during the earthquake and the building collapse. With someone as brilliant, wise, and almost divine as Dostoevsky, how could he not foresee such a situation? Thus, it had to be Dostoevsky's plan, and he hadn't told him because he was too foolish. If he had known, he might have accidentally interfered with his master's plan. Too much admiration can also lead to tragedy. Even though, in Ivan Goncharov's eyes, Dostoevsky was a god, in reality, he was still human. Natural disasters and human actions, Dostoevsky could perceive traces left behind, and based on experience and wisdom, predict human actions. But accidents are unpredictable. What can be predicted isn't really an accident. Although he had read about Komaeda Nagito and wasn't unfamiliar with meteors, Dostoevsky had analyzed it and deemed it unlikely for Komaeda Nagito to reach that kind of meteor-level danger again. From what he gathered, most of Komaeda Nagito's misfortunes after that point were of a low-risk type, occasionally reaching mid-level, but meteor level was out of the ordinary, an occurrence that hadn't happened even once in recent years. But this time, it reached a high-level disaster of mountains collapsing, directly leading to his amnesia. Dostoevsky really hadn't seen that coming. The government had classified Komaeda Nagito as an ordinary person, yet he had dared to cause such a disturbance. All just to save Oda Sakanosuke, a person he had known for a little over a year. Collapsing a mountain, isn't that just asking to be imprisoned by the government? Dostoevsky had almost immediately understood why Komaeda Nagito could live freely in a world for ordinary people, and if it weren't for Yakuran Gesso's intelligence, he wouldn't have noticed this person at all. Though he still couldn't confirm if what Yakuran said about crime and punishment was related to Komaeda Nagito, there was certainly someone in the upper echelons of the government protecting Komaeda Nagito. Unfortunately, at the time, there was no way to think deeply about this conclusion, because Dostoevsky soon lost consciousness, and when he regained it, even his memories were gone, until he entered Masalt, where all his memories finally returned. Dostoevsky. Recovering his memories now, could it be a little too late? As expected, pursuing perfection wasn't the biggest enemy of good planning, accidents were. My head hurts. Even for someone like him, leaving Masalt under these conditions was going to be troublesome. It needed more careful consideration. Ignoring the poor fellow in Masalt with no foreseeable release date, after Mimic's destruction, Yokohama's atmosphere had shifted. No longer needing to worry about when the next terrorist attack might occur, there was now a hint of summer vacation in the air. After Oda Sakanosuke resigned, he openly took the kids back in, no longer needing to worry about retaliation from the port mafia. He even had time to finish a draft for a certain literary award, and Oda Sakanosuke himself couldn't help but sigh. People really can be forced to their limits. Compared to the busy lives of society's functioning adults, Komaeda Nagito's life seemed far more relaxed. After the Mimic and landslide events were completely resolved, Komaeda Nagito was finally allowed to leave. Once allowed out, He deliberately sought out Edgar Allan Poe to apologize, admitting his wrongdoings and sincerely reflecting on his actions, before promptly being kicked out by Edgar Allan Poe. I believe that it was clearly misguided, Poe-san, you'll surely notice, after all, it was only meant as a test, but it turned out to be successful. Ha ha ha, I took advantage of Poe-san's trust in me, I'm really sorry, truly, if there's anything I can do to make up for it, please don't hesitate to command me. Listen to this, is this even human speech? The last few sentences almost sound like an apology, but what was all that before? But Komaeda Nagito is just that kind of person. Edgar Allan Poe was already well aware of his character, and at times, Komaeda Nagito's cunningness was beyond even his comprehension. Now, it seemed like a case of things coming back to bite him. Anyway, he was really mad. He definitely wasn't going to forgive Komaeda Nagito in the short term. Not long after, Edgar Allan Poe suddenly received an email from Komaeda Nagito. At first, he was too upset to even consider opening it, but eventually, he clicked it open to take a look. Poe-san, I'm currently at the Armed Detective Agency. This is a picture of Ron Poe-san. He agreed to let me send it to you as an apology, hoping it might cheer you up a bit. Image. Edgar Allan Poe. Does Ron Poe like this kind of snack? Maybe he should buy some to try later. No. What does Ron Poe liking something have anything to do with him? Why would Komaeda think that sending him a picture of Ron Poe would make him happy? Well, whatever. He didn't have any snacks at home anyway, so he might as well go out and buy some. At the Armed Detective Agency, Komaeda Nagito closed his phone with a cheerful smile and said to Edogawa Ranpo, "Thank you so much, Ranpo-san. The president told me to look after you, so a small request like this isn't a big deal." Edogawa Ranpo had somewhat changed his previous attitude of subtly rejecting Komaeda Nagito. Now, when he looked at him, there was a kind of subtle tolerance. Why, you ask? The reason lay with Fukuzawa Yukichi. When Komaeda Nagito came to thank him, the senior disciple noticed that Ranpo seemed to look at Komaeda Nagito with an expression of a big brother watching over his younger sibling. He had a sudden idea and asked Ranpo for a favor to keep an eye on Komaeda Nagito. If anything seemed off, he should report immediately. That was something Ranpo could handle. Entrusted with such an important task, Edogawa Ranpo felt Fukuzawa Yukichi's trust. He immediately became more attentive towards Komaeda Nagito. See, the president still trusted him the most. Komaeda Nagito just kept giving the president trouble, and Ranpo-sama had to look after him. The president surely liked Ranpo-sama more. And so Edogawa Ranpo took Komaeda Nagito under his wing, while Komaeda Nagito consciously helped out with some of Kudo Shinichi's work. Surprisingly, there were no accidents, and everything went smoothly. Most importantly, Komaeda Nagito could sing endless praises of Edogawa Ranpo without batting an eye. The way he piled on compliments, Kudo Shinichi was left dumbfounded at the side, finally realizing that the praise Komaeda-senpai had given him before had actually been restrained. But Edogawa Ranpo enjoyed it all. Especially since the praise from Komaeda Nagito came from the heart, it made him find Komaeda Nagito increasingly agreeable. Even Yosano Akiko, after observing for a while, also started to view Komaeda Nagito differently, feeling that although this child was rash before, he wasn't a bad kid. Usually, he behaved quite obediently, and he even put himself out there for his friends, which spoke volumes. During a break, Kudo Shinichi suddenly remembered something and casually asked, "Senpai, does Daisayo-samu still stay at your place?" "Ah." Komaeda Nagito pondered for a few seconds. "Actually, after that day, Daisaikuin hasn't contacted me." Chapter 81 End. Chapter 82, Flip a coin to decide whether to mend it or not. Edogawa Ranpo heard Komaeda Nagito's response, glanced at him, and said nonchalantly, "If you want to say something, just go directly to him. He definitely won't mind you being annoying." Komaeda Nagito gave a bitter laugh without replying, but everyone could tell that after mentioning this, he seemed a little distracted. This was indeed a rare sight. It had to be known that Komaeda Nagito had never hesitated to take a bullet for himself, and afterward even went alone to confront Mimic. The armed detective agency's impression of him was always of someone fast and resolute. No one expected that something could make him so troubled. Yosano Akiko recalled the 2 times she had met Dazai Osamu. The first time, she had been so scared she dropped everything. Best not to bring that up. The second time, Dazai's feeling of utter despair was strangely compelling. She even thought that Komaeda Nagito was beyond saving. In the end, it turned out that Dazai Osamu had simply been too panicked, his fingers had gone numb, and he made a mistake in his assessment. For a mistake like this to happen with someone like Dazai Osamu really said something. Yosano Akiko felt that Dazai Osamu's attitude towards Komaeda Nagito was very clear, absolutely a lifelong friendship. She really couldn't understand why Komaeda Nagito was hesitating. Moreover, she knew that Komaeda Nagito was Fukuzawa Yukichi's junior disciple, so she treated him like one of their own. Seeing Komaeda Nagito seemingly in some conflict with a friend, she thought she might have gone overboard lecturing him last time. This was a chance to act as the big sister and soften Komaeda's impression of her a bit. So, Yosano Akiko walked over and patted Komaeda Nagito's shoulder. "Come on, let's chat. Yosano-san, please spare me." Even someone as resilient as Komaeda Nagito had his limits, and right now he seemed overwhelmed. "After I got back, I seriously reflected on my actions, and I agree with everything you said. Next time, I definitely won't recklessly rush in alone." Yosano Akiko awkwardly cleared her throat. "That's not what I meant. Should have known, I really did overdo it last time. So, this time, I must work harder to fix my image." Temporarily resting her hand on Komaeda Nagito's shoulder, she pulled him aside to sit down. Pouring 2 glasses of water, Yosano Akiko started by apologizing. "About last time, I wasn't targeting you personally, I just got carried away, venting some frustration I'd accumulated towards patients in general. After I calmed down, I felt I'd gone too far. Sorry." "It's okay. I know Yosano-san meant well. It would be pretty ungrateful of me to hold a grudge." Komaeda Nagito smiled gently. "But, what did you want to talk about this time?" Yosano Akiko, seeing Komaeda Nagito being so forgiving, felt even more embarrassed. "No, this time I just noticed you seem troubled. While I'm not a psychologist, if there's anything bothering you, you can talk to me, and I'll see if I can help. But if you feel you can handle it on your own, that's fine too." Mostly, she was worried about Komaeda Nagito. Last time he came to the armed detective agency, asking about Mimic's headquarters, he even shot himself to speed up his recovery. She hadn't taken it seriously, and later that day, there had been a landslide. Now she was concerned Komaeda Nagito might be keeping something even more serious to himself, which could lead to even bigger trouble. Yosano Akiko didn't know that Fukuzawa Yukichi had entrusted Komaeda Nagito entirely to Edogawa Ranpo, and Ranpo kept a close watch over him. If anything happened, Edogawa Ranpo would definitely notice, and Yosano didn't need to worry. She just wanted to care for Komaeda Nagito from her own perspective. Komaeda Nagito frowned deeply, lost in thought. Just as Yosano Akiko was about to think that he planned to handle it himself, he spoke. "Actually, now that I think about it, Yosano-san might understand better. I feel like I've upset Dazai-kun." Yosano Akiko instantly understood. Because of what happened with Mimic. That was certainly worth getting mad about. Even she could see that Dazai Osamu had been very shaken. Emotional swings like that aren't good for one's heart, especially with how quickly things had changed afterward. Even though Komaeda Nagito was saved, Dazai's face didn't show a smile, just cold fury. However, he still made sure to carefully cover Komaeda with his coat, so his anger must have had its limits. "After I had my phone fixed, I sent Dazai-kun an apology, but he hasn't replied. And even now, I haven't heard from him at all." Komaeda Nagito thought out loud. "Maybe there was something wrong with the way I worded my message. What should I do next? Yosano Akiko thought for a moment. Can you show me the apology you sent? Komaeda Nagito took out his phone and handed it to her. Yosano Akiko scrolled through it, unable to help but feel puzzled. This style. Surprisingly normal. She had expected something more like Komaeda's usual way, first belittling himself, then praising Dazai Osamu. In that case, Dazai Osamu getting angrier and ignoring him would have been understandable. But this was written sincerely. There wasn't just one message, he had sent 3 or 4 over time. You wrote very well, there's no problem. Yosano Akiko returned the phone to Komaeda Nagito. Honestly, if it were me, I'd forgive you after reading this. Komaeda Nagito continued explaining, actually, it was largely thanks to what Yosano-san said to me on the plane that I truly understood where I was wrong. I'm really grateful, you were incredibly dazzling when you scolded me back then. Yosano Akiko, embarrassed by the compliment, had to admit she was just getting angrier and angrier at the time, and what she said afterward had nothing to do with Komaeda Nagito. It was mostly just venting her dissatisfaction with patients in general. But if it somehow worked, then that wasn't too bad. Komaeda Nagito sighed afterward. If it's just about being angry, Yosano-san didn't think it was a problem, but Dazai-kun still refuses to acknowledge me. Yosano Akiko couldn't quite figure it out either, because in her opinion, Komaeda Nagito's apology was indeed very sincere. She could even sense how much he valued Dazai Osamu as a friend, which was why he'd written so many normal messages, avoiding self-deprecation or attempts at flattery. Maybe you should buy him a gift? Yosano Akiko suggested seriously. What does he like? Komaeda Nagito responded just as seriously, the complete suicide. Yosano Akiko. Damn it, her gut was right after all, he really is someone who doesn't get along with her. Anything other than that? Yosano Akiko asked, exasperated. Food, drinks. Food. He's recently been interested in poisonous mushrooms. Komaeda Nagito recalled. As for drinks, I'm not too sure, but he often orders bleach at the bar. Yosano Akiko, don't buy anything at all, just bring some fruit and apologize to him face to face. See how he reacts, it's sometimes better to communicate in person. Komaeda Nagito accepted Yosano Akiko's suggestion and, seeing it was still early, left to follow through. Of course, he didn't know where Dazai Osamu was. He didn't get a response when he asked. Oda-san was currently secluded, working on a new manuscript, so he didn't want to disturb him either. But Komaeda Nagito had a way to find out, by going directly to the Port Mafia headquarters and asking. Before, every time he went to the Port Mafia headquarters, it was because Dazai Osamu had called him there. This time, he was making a rare proactive visit. The receptionist was the same familiar person. 7 out of 10 times Komaeda Nagito came to the Port Mafia, it was this person on duty. However, this time, she was visibly startled when she saw Komaeda Nagito, her expression slightly bewildered. Komaeda Nagito smiled curiously and asked, "What's wrong?" "No, nothing, my apologies, Komaeda-san. I need to contact someone upstairs first." When Komaeda Nagito approached the Port Mafia headquarters building, he could already sense something unusual. The way people were looking at him seemed peculiar. Although, to be fair, people had always looked at him in a peculiar way whenever he came here, but this time, it felt different. As for what was different and why, Komaeda Nagito overheard the receptionist on the phone referring to the boss instead of the usual Dazai-sama. He thought to himself that he might soon find out. Sure enough, after the receptionist hung up, she looked at Komaeda Nagito apologetically and said, "Komaeda-san, the boss would like you to go up and see him." Komaeda Nagito nodded calmly, "I understand." Soon, someone arrived to escort him, leading Komaeda Nagito to the boss's office. "Komaeda-kun, long time no see." Mori Ogai sat casually on a sofa by the window, gesturing for Komaeda Nagito to sit on the other side of the small round table. "Are you here to see Dazai-kun?" Komaeda Nagito admitted, "Yes, except for Dazai-kun, I'm not that familiar with anyone else." Don't say that, aren't you very familiar with Oda Sakanosuke? And also Sakaguchi Ango. Mori Ogai extended his hand to pour tea for Komaeda Nagito. Oda-kun resigned to focus on writing, truly a pity. I actually had high hopes for him. Komaeda Nagito naturally continued, Oda-san is more suited to being a writer. He is racing the deadline to submit the manuscript for a competition. Fortunately, he wasn't affected by Mimic. I see. Though Komaeda Nagito only said that one line, Mori Ogai, being perceptive, immediately understood why Komaeda Nagito had suddenly gotten involved with Mimic. He had thought it unlikely to be about the apartment in Tokyo. If it had been about the house in Yokohama filled with memories of his parents being bombed by Mimic, Komaeda Nagito seeking revenge would make sense, but Tokyo? Why have such an obsession there? It turns out it was because of Oda Sakanosuke. He probably hid it from Dazai Osamu as well. Otherwise, Dazai Osamu wouldn't have been that out of sorts, although he kept a tight lid on it back then, but if it's the Port Mafia boss asking, then that's something entirely different. Therefore, Mori Ogai knew how Dazai Osamu reacted and also knew that Yosano Akiko had followed along. The armed detective agency had clearly taken Komaeda Nagito's side. Fukuzawa Yukichi must have known Komaeda Nagito was their junior disciple. Mori Ogai decided to probe a little. I heard that the armed detective agency was there to help. How did you get along with your senior brother? He seems like a very serious person. Did he scold you? Komaeda Nagito showed a surprised expression, Mori-san. There wasn't an opportunity to mention this before. Mori Ogai confirmed what he wanted to know. Actually, I am the second disciple taken in by Natsume-sensei. When the two of us are together, you can call me senior brother. Komaeda Nagito was genuinely shocked. When he found out Fukuzawa Yukichi was his senior, he was already quite astonished. He never imagined Mori Ogai was also one. Natsume-sensei has an incredible eye for talent. Moreover, the previous disciples Natsume-sensei had taken were of such a high caliber. He had always encouraged Komaeda Nagito to have more confidence, saying that he possessed qualities worthy of being a disciple. Natsume-sensei really thought highly of him. Sensei never mentioned it to me. Natsume-sensei did ask me to take care of you, Mori Ogai said without a hint of guilt, polishing his image. I'm genuinely pleased to see you and Dazai-kun getting along so well. Aside from that incident with Akutagawa-kun, no one in the Port Mafia has made things difficult for you, right? No, not at all. I'm extremely grateful to you, Mori-san, for allowing me, an outsider, to come and go from your headquarters as I please, Komaeda Nagito replied. I feel truly embarrassed that I haven't expressed my gratitude to you earlier. Mori Ogai kept a straight face, saying, It's alright. When Natsume-sensei asks about it, I can provide a reasonable account. Junior brother, help me say a few good words, boost my standing a bit, thanks. Hopefully, Sensei will cut my skilled business permit a few more months ahead of time. After chatting a bit to build rapport with Komaeda Nagito, Mori Ogai had largely achieved his goals for today, and what remained was mere small talk. By the way, Komaeda-kun, you came here looking for Dazai-kun, right? Unfortunately, you won't be able to find him at the Port Mafia after today. Recalling Oda Sakanosuke and Sakaguchi Ango, Komaeda Nagito instantly understood. Could it be that Dazai-kun has also? Mori Ogai put on an act, sighing, yes, Dazai-kun fled from his duties this morning. He used to frequently ditch his assignments, didn't he? Komaeda Nagito, familiar with Dazai Osamu, quickly voiced his doubts. But before, even if he disappeared, he would still complete the assignments. This time, he sabotaged the mission and used the opportunity to escape. Mori Ogai spoke in a regretful tone. I never thought Dazai-kun would do something like this. I'm quite surprised. By the way, have you two been in touch recently? Komaeda Nagito, though still a minor, wasn't someone who blindly believed everything people said. Even though Mori Ogai now had the title of senior brother, Dazai Osamu had spent too much time badmouthing Mori Ogai. Thus, other than the confirmation from Natsume-sensei, Komaeda would only believe about 20% of anything else Mori Ogai said. Sensing the tension between Dazai Osamu and Mori Ogai, Komaeda Nagito naturally treaded carefully when it came to topics related to Dazai Osamu. Luckily, the answer wasn't something he had to lie about. No, Komaeda Nagito smiled bitterly, I probably upset Dazai-kun. He hasn't contacted me since we came down from the mountain, and even ignored my messages. I came here this time to apologize to him in person. Mori Ogai wasn't truly concerned about Dazai Osamu's whereabouts. After all, he had no intention of bringing Dazai Osamu back. This was just part of the understanding between teacher and student, he was merely curious about where Dazai had gone after his escape. However, it was unexpected that after the mimic incident, Dazai Osamu hadn't contacted Komaeda Nagito. And from Komaeda Nagito's expression, he could tell he wasn't lying. This surprised Mori Ogai a lot, because from his observation, and from Dazai's reaction during the incident report meeting, it seemed unlikely that Dazai Osamu would break ties with Komaeda Nagito. Dazai Osamu had probably already figured out that he and Komaeda Nagito were fellow disciples. If he's staying at Komaeda Nagito's place, would Mori Ogai really send people to go mess up his junior's room? Given Dazai's personality, wouldn't it make more sense for him to swagger right into Komaeda Nagito's home, and even if he and Komaeda Nagito ran into Mori Ogai and Elise while they were out shopping, he'd still greet them openly and smugly, just to get under Mori Ogai's skin? The only people Dazai Osamu would actively avoid were the likes of Akutagawa Yunosuke and Nakahara Chuya, people who would immediately attack him. His reputation was built upon the shadows of countless people's psyches. Even if people saw him on the streets, they wouldn't dare to cause trouble. Besides, if he really wanted to hide, he could disappear easily. After all, the Port Mafia surveillance system was something Dazai had personally set up. Mori Ogai's mind quickly analyzed Dazai Osamu's habits, and eventually, he simply told Komaeda Nagito, maybe he's not safe at the moment. When things calm down, he'll probably contact you. Don't worry, I won't make you tell me where he is. After all, he is still my disciple. He has contributed greatly to the Port Mafia. Even though he has now defected, I have no intention of pursuing him. However, for appearance's sake, I still need to issue a warrant. I hope you understand. Playing the innocent betrayed master card, Mori Ogai almost painted himself as someone hurt and innocent. Whether Komaeda Nagito believed it or not was one thing. Besides, Dazai Osamu would surely say he was lying, but it was still something worth saying, perhaps a casual move in a future game of chess, one that might prove useful. Thus, after warming up to his senior brother, getting the latest internal intel that had yet to spread, Komaeda Nagito left the headquarters. Upon arriving home, Komaeda Nagito sat on the sofa, and as soon as he looked up, he saw Dazai Osamu's coat, given to him on the day of the landslide, still hanging in the living room. Once he became aware of this, Komaeda Nagito looked around and noticed even more, everywhere there were traces of another person. It turned out that Oda Sakanosuke, the last one who cleaned up, hadn't left anything behind. Habits are really scary. He had lived alone for nearly 10 years, but now, just 1 week without seeing Dazai-kun, he began to feel an eerie emptiness in his apartment. Perhaps I shouldn't have agreed to him staying permanently back then. Komaeda Nagito lay on the sofa, one hand covering his eyes. Now I have to get used to it again. It was just too much. He had planned to live a lonely life forever, unwilling to lose anyone important again. Yet there was someone who just had to barge into his life, Dazai Osamu being the most aggressive. And now, after promising, a friend who will never leave you, he disappeared without saying a word, leaving Komaeda Nagito all alone. He had thought Dazai-kun was leaving to take on the burden of his bad luck, but now it seemed like Dazai had taken his life force and left long before anything significant happened. Was it fortunate or unfortunate? Suddenly, his phone buzzed. A new email had arrived. Komaeda Nagito checked it and found it was a reply from Oda Sakanosuke to the message he had sent after leaving the Port Mafia headquarters. Sorry to disturb you while you're busy, Oda-san. However, I think you should know this. Dazai-kun escaped this morning. Do you know anything about it? Where is he now? As expected, even though he went missing for a while on his end, Oda-san wasn't affected in the slightest. Komaeda Nagito took out a coin. Alright then, let's leave it to luck. Komaeda Nagito sighed, if it's heads, I'll just go with the flow. Sever the ties if that's what happens. If it's tails, then I'll try to mend things. Saying that, he moved his fingers, flipping the coin up into the air. As it was about to fall, he attempted to catch it on the back of his hand. Unfortunately, he missed, and the coin veered off course, falling to the ground. By the time Komaeda Nagito hurriedly stood up to retrieve it, the coin had already come to a rest, lying still on the floor. It was heads. Komaeda Nagito's hand froze for a second before he picked it up. He wasn't sure what he was feeling at that moment. He just instinctively let out a laugh. Ha ha ha, so I should just give up, right? After laughing, Komaeda Nagito stood there in a daze for a few seconds. Then, suddenly, he sprang into action, starting to gather up Dazai-Osamu's belongings, intending to pack them up and send them over to Oda Sakanosuke. After all, even though Dazai-Osamu had severed ties with him, he still had contact with Oda Sakanosuke. Komaeda Nagito felt reassured leaving his things at Oda-san's place. While he was folding Dazai-Osamu's coat, a few coins slipped out of its pocket. This time, he reacted quickly, catching one just before it rolled off the edge of the sofa. Just as he was about to put it back into the coat pocket, Komaeda Nagito suddenly paused, contemplating for a few seconds. A coin that falls to the ground, isn't that result meaningless? After a moment's hesitation, Komaeda Nagito slowly opened his hand, looking at the coin in his palm. This time, it was tails. Komaeda Nagito didn't realize that he subconsciously let out a sigh of relief. He simply put the coin back into the coat pocket, then tossed the coat onto the sofa, sitting down to send another message to Dazai-Osamu. The previous message he'd sent was, I'm heading to headquarters now to find you. This time, Komaeda Nagito wrote, where are you right now? After some thought, Komaeda Nagito sent another one, do you want me to gather all your things from here and send them over? After sending those two messages, Komaeda Nagito closed the mailbox interface. Alright. He muttered, if there's no reply by tonight, I'll start packing tomorrow. At that moment, two arms suddenly wrapped around his shoulders from behind, and the familiar weight settled on him. That familiar voice sounded right beside his ear. All your stuff here, does that include the birthday present I gave you? I said anything I give away that isn't liked should be returned to me, didn't I? Komaeda Nagito was startled. Turning his head, he saw, as expected, Dazai-Osamu. Dazai-kun? What are you doing here? I've been here since before you got back, hiding today, Dazai-Osamu said with an innocent look. He released Komaeda Nagito, propping himself up on the back of the sofa, and moved over to sit beside him. I was resting in the room, and when I woke up, I saw Komaeda-kun sending messages that seemed like you wanted to cut ties with me. That's really too much. Komaeda Nagito wasn't fooled by this kind of talk. He gave a very standard smile, completely unconcealed in his displeasure, and laughed softly. Weren't you the one who wanted to cut ties first, Dazai-kun? Are you talking about me not replying to you? Dazai-Osamu had been prepared for this. Komaeda-kun knows the reason, right? It's because I was a little angry. Being angry was only part of it. In truth, when he received that first apology message from Komaeda Nagito, a thought suddenly flashed through Dazai-Osamu's mind. Maybe, this was a chance to really see what Komaeda-kun thought of him. After that, he deliberately cut contact, and sure enough, when he didn't reach out, Komaeda Nagito actively tried to connect. But what made him decide to show up in person was what had just happened with the coin toss. So, even someone like Komaeda-kun, who trusted his luck so much, would find an excuse to try again if the result didn't fit his expectations, huh? Chapter 82 End. Chapter 83, Other Worlds, Dazai-Osamu. Dazai-Osamu made a reasonable point, but when he brought up the banner of, I'm angry because I'm worried about you, Komaeda Nagito could only remain silent. Though he would likely do the same thing next time. He didn't hate the feeling of being worried about, so he decided to keep to himself thoughts like, rest assured, if it were so easy to die, how could it be called lucky? As if he could see what Komaeda Nagito was thinking, Dazai-Osamu smiled. Anyway, even though Komaeda-kun says he's sorry and wrote so many apology messages, it's not really how you feel, right? I'm not actually trying to stop you, you know. Just let me know next time, if possible. Komaeda Nagito finally reacted a little, hahaha, Dazai-kun really is too perceptive about me. Though others cared for him too, being with Dazai-Osamu felt lighter compared to those in the detective agency. They fundamentally didn't understand him and couldn't accept his true thoughts. But with Dazai-kun, it was relaxed. The same applied to Oda-san. After knowing the whole story, he didn't dismiss his efforts with things like, I'll handle it myself. Instead, he sincerely thanked him and said, Dazai is probably really mad. With just a short sentence, Oda Sakanosuke showed that he understood the gravity of the situation and showed his concern for Komaeda Nagito, while also mentioning Dazai-Osamu. It was truly an example of a perfect friend. More than preaching, Komaeda Nagito found that Oda Sakanosuke acknowledged his help in a simple way that satisfied him. As for Dazai-Osamu, Komaeda Nagito's mind drifted back to when he had just been healed by Yosano Akiko, and when he stood up and saw Dazai-Osamu's eyes at that very moment. Those eyes were so familiar. Where had he seen them before? Ah, it was in another world, when he met Port Mafia boss Dazai-Osamu. When he had just arrived in this world, those eyes looked at him in the same way. But now wasn't the time for this. Komaeda Nagito gently shook his head, bringing his attention back to the current topic. So, Dazai-kun knows I won't repent, and that's why you're still angry? Hahaha, let's just let it go. Dazai-Osamu showed a level of forgiveness that anyone in the Port Mafia would find unbelievable, smiling as he changed the topic. Now that you're back from headquarters, Mori-san should have talked to you, right? Komaeda Nagito nodded. Dazai-kun, do you have any plans next? Mori-san said he's not planning to force you back. He wouldn't dare. From Komaeda Nagito's words, Dazai-Osamu knew Mori Ogai had most certainly been frantically smuggling things in secret. However, he wasn't interested in explaining every detail, knowing Mori Ogai wouldn't push too far. After all, Komaeda-kun wasn't easy to deceive. As for what's next, I haven't fully decided yet, but I might go pay a visit to Vangala. Vangala? Yes, there are some things that still need to be confirmed for peace of mind. Komaeda Nagito was on summer vacation, and so was the 10th Vangala boss, Sawada Tsuneyoshi. And for a vacation project, he came to Yokohama before summer ended to meet with Port Mafia boss Mori Ogai. As Reborn said, since Tsuna's combat ability wasn't too bad right now, it was time to strengthen his social skills in boss preparation. They would start with Port Mafia before dealing with the Mafia in Italy. Mori Ogai probably realized he was being treated as a beginner's boss training ground, but he didn't mind. After all, even if he was used for training, he did gain some benefit from Vangala. Moreover, forming a partnership with such a well-known name in Italy also helped to stabilize the slightly unsettled Port Mafia after Dazai-Osamu fled. Dazai-Osamu's influence on the Port Mafia was simply too great, and forcing him out was one thing. Mori Ogai had no idea that while he was cursing Dazai-Osamu, Dazai was secretly meeting with Vangala. They discussed things far more in-depth than with Mori, which made Reborn quite satisfied, while Sawada Tsuneyoshi was left bewildered, only grasping the parts related to Dazai-Osamu's escape. The exchange went something like this. I didn't expect Boss Mori to be that kind of person. To actually gamble your friend's life. The naive, lovable 14-year-old Sawada Tsuneyoshi was moved. Thankfully, everyone is alright. Dazai-Osamu smiled, right, because I really don't want to see that Lelicon's face again, so I ran off. Sawada Tsuneyoshi was stunned. Ah, to think Boss Mori is. Dazai-san, you've been following him for a long time, right? That must have been tough. Dazai-Osamu looked sorrowful. It's all in the past. Sympathy filled Sawada Tsuneyoshi. Yeah, it's all in the past. So, What are your plans now? Probably to become a good person. I'll support you. Observing Reborn. Since most of what he said was probably true, Tsuna's hyper-intuition didn't react. But being so easily trusting, he still lacked training. Sensing Reborn quietly adding more training for him, Sawada Tsunayoshi shivered, looking at Reborn. He could see his tutor's eyes full of, "Shut up." Thus, Reborn began conversing with Dazai Osamu, while Sawada Tsunayoshi's eyes started to glaze over, unable to leave but trying his hardest to understand. In the end, Reborn found Dazai Osamu useful, sent someone to escort him to Lambo, and stayed behind to give Sawada Tsunayoshi additional lessons. If it were appropriate, I'd actually like him to join Vangala. Dazai-san wants to be a good person, so he can't jump from one mafia to another. Reborn. No, the issue wasn't that. Dazai Osamu just wouldn't fit in with Tsunayoshi's approach. If he truly joined Vangala, Tsuna might end up being held back by Dazai Osamu. After arriving in Yokohama, Reborn noticed the Port Mafia's pursuit of Dazai Osamu was almost non-existent. It showed that Dazai Osamu must have enough leverage to destroy Port Mafia if needed, and Mori Ogai didn't want a complete breakdown. To achieve this level at just 18 years old, Mori Ogai's inability to tolerate him made perfect sense. Enough. Reborn felt this had little to do with Vangala. The priority was back on Sawada Tsunayoshi. How much did you understand of our conversation just now? Sawada Tsunayoshi sweated profusely. Dazai-san wanted the 10-year bazooka. And he needed it last time too. Why is he so concerned about it? Isn't traveling to the future too often kind of, not good? Well, if it's him it probably doesn't matter, Reborn replied. Dazai Osamu is smart. Dazai Osamu, the smart one, managed to trick Lambo into giving him the 10-year bazooka, then took it to Komaeda Nagito's resting room. Vangala's condition was that the bazooka had to be used on their grounds, and Dazai Osamu didn't mind. If it failed this time, he could easily get another one from nearby. As for why he brought Komaeda Nagito. Komaeda Nagito, who was reading a book, noticed Dazai Osamu's return and set it down to ask, "Did you get it?" "Yes." Dazai Osamu smiled. "Now, let's proceed according to our plan." Port Mafia boss Dazai Osamu was in his office reviewing documents as usual when pink smoke suddenly appeared in front of him. It was time. He immediately knew this was the chance he'd been waiting for. He quickly stepped out of the smoke, looked around, and immediately saw Komaeda Nagito sitting on the sofa. "Oh." Komaeda Nagito smiled at him. "Do you recognize me?" Dazai Osamu smiled, "Of course, Komaeda-kun." Komaeda Nagito confirmed, "Where did we meet last time?" "On the beach in Hawaii." "Ah, I see." Dazai Osamu chuckled. "Judging by how he failed, he must have asked you to come help." "Ha ha ha, I'm really glad I can help Dazai-kun." As boss Dazai predicted, Dazai Osamu brought Komaeda Nagito mainly to avoid the same issues as last time. Like swapping places and one version of himself falling asleep during an exchange. It was such a waste of time that Dazai Osamu felt he was losing his mind. Since Oda Saku was working on something new and couldn't help, he had to bring Komaeda Nagito. It would have been even better if it's the previous boss version that come, saving Dazai Osamu the trouble of explaining everything. Boss Dazai sat across from Komaeda Nagito, smiling as he spoke, "Time is relatively tight, so let's skip the pleasantries for now. Let me ask, how old am I now?" Komaeda Nagito replied, 18 years old, just recently escaped. Although he already knew the answer, this Dazai Osamu still instinctively confirmed. "Oda Saku is fine, right? He's chasing a manuscript." Komaeda Nagito suddenly grew excited. "Oda-san seems to have entered a fountain of inspiration recently. The last time I went there, the editor was also present, and they couldn't stop praising the new character setup. They said he would definitely win an award." As expected of Oda-san, he finally found the right field to properly display his talents. I'm genuinely happy for him. Dazai Osamu smiled. Yes, I'm happy too. Let's get to the main topic. I know what he wants to know, but I'm not willing to say it now. Tell him this, after he goes to meet Oda Saku from my world, I'll tell him the answer. Just say that to him. Dazai Osamu had no reservations, even though another version of himself was involved, fully prepared to make it difficult. For now, keep me company for a chat, will you? Komaeda Nagito pondered for a second, attempting to gain a bit of advantage for his version of Dazai Osamu. Can't you just say it directly? The older Dazai Osamu remained silent for a few seconds, his expression deep, before laughing softly. It's truly unfair, I'm also Dazai Osamu. Komaeda Nagito replied without much thought, you two aren't the same. After speaking, he was a bit startled, coughing awkwardly under Dazai Osamu's intrigued gaze. Ahaha, after all, I'm more familiar with the Dazai-kun from my world. Dazai Osamu leaned back, as if considering something, then shortly after gave a particularly bright smile, one that, if seen by his world's Nakahara Chuya, would surely give him nightmares. No matter, we can take our time getting to know each other better. When the time came, both versions of Dazai Osamu switched back. Dazai Osamu looked at Komaeda Nagito. So, did you find out anything? Sorry, Dazai-kun. It seems trash like me still can't do anything properly. He said he knows what you want to ask, but he refuses to tell me. He said you need to go meet the Oda Saku from his world first. Komaeda Nagito sighed bitterly. After that, we just talked about random things, nothing useful came up. Dazai Osamu wasn't surprised. I see, I figured he wouldn't cooperate so easily. Both of you are clearly Dazai-kun, so why is the attitude so weird? Komaeda Nagito imagined another version of himself and felt that their goals should be the same, there shouldn't be any situation of hindering each other. Dazai Osamu kept a smile on his face but laughed internally. Why else, if not out of jealousy towards him? In his world, not only was Oda Saku alive, but he also had an additional Komaeda-kun. He said to try again after half an hour. Komaeda Nagito said, how many 10-year bazooka shots do you have left? I have 2 left. I'll get more if needed. Having scammed more than half of Lambo's stock, Dazai Osamu spoke as though the 10-year bazookas were his personal belongings. Since he hadn't experimented too many times, calculating the probability of connecting to Boss Dazai's world was a bit tricky. It was best to have enough in reserve, considering Reborn was also difficult to deal with. Quickly beginning to draft various contingency plans in his head, Dazai Osamu smiled and sat down. Komaeda-kun, why don't you tell me what you two talked about earlier? Half an hour passed quickly, and when the time came, Dazai Osamu immediately initiated the next trial. Before Komaeda Nagito stood a figure dressed in pure white, entirely contrary to Dazai Osamu's usual taste in fashion. Clearly, this was a Dazai Osamu from a different world. He blinked and asked with a smile, hello, who are you? Was that a 10-year bazooka just now? You really know to chose time. Hello, I am Komaeda Nagito, a friend of Dazai-kun from this world. Komaeda Nagito refrained from adding anything like thick-skinned or temporary. Indeed, it was a 10-year bazooka. After Dazai-kun discovered he could communicate with versions of himself from parallel worlds, he wanted to give it a try. What were you up to on your side? Why isn't it a good time? Actually, I'm in prison. Dazai Osamu spoke in an excited tone. I didn't expect to get a chance to communicate this soon. Those people must be terrified right now, especially Fio. What a pity I can't see his expression myself. Fio. A name immediately came to Komaeda Nagito's mind. Dostoevsky? You know him. Have you met him? This Dazai Osamu blinked. By the way, I haven't asked yet. What year is it now? Dazai-kun just escaped from the port mafia. I think that's what you wanted to know. Komaeda Nagito said. As for Dostoevsky. Yes, we did meet, but as far as I know, he was hit on the head and lost his memory. I didn't expect you to still be dealing with someone suffering from amnesia. Dazai Osamu. No, My Dostoevsky here didn't lose his memory. What was this guy who claimed to be a friend of his talking about? Did something so spectacular happen when he escaped? Chapter 83 End. Chapter 84, The Only Good Person. When the armed detective Dazai was exchanged to the past, Komaeda Nagito's version of Dazai Osamu appeared in another world inside a special ability prison called Masalt. The people monitoring were instantly surprised, bustling up in excitement. Wait! How did he appear over there? Where is Dazai Osamu? Zoom in on the image. It seems like it's also Dazai Osamu. But the clothing and age are completely different. What in the world is going on? The Dazai Osamu that appeared in Masalt looked somewhat surprised. He instantly recognized the person in the opposite cell and looked around at the peculiar environment, realizing immediately that it didn't resemble an ordinary prison. I ended up in this world's Masalt, he remarked, amused, and glanced at the inmate in the adjacent cell. Hey fellow prisoner, how are you? The inmate next door looked slightly stunned, as if not expecting this development. But soon enough, he reacted, offering a faint smile. Parallel world Dazai, huh? With this age difference, is the 10-year bazooka malfunctioning again? You know the 10-year bazooka always malfunctions. Looks like you didn't lose your memory in this world. Dostoevsky. Excuse me. It seemed he had heard something strange. Since when did the word amnesia have any association with him? And judging from this Dazai Osamu's expression, it didn't seem like he was mistaken. Dazai Osamu's face was full of schadenfreude, captured by countless cameras, sharing his own jokes. The mountain near where you were living collapsed, causing an earthquake, which collapsed your house as well. After being taken to the hospital, you lost your memory. After confirming your identity, they decided to transfer you to Masalt. I didn't even go out of my way to inquire about this information, but everyone knows it. They originally intended to use this information to lure your accomplices, but when your accomplice got caught elsewhere, they revealed they believed your amnesia was also part of your plan, so they didn't rush to your rescue, just watched you get put into Masalt. Since Dazai Osamu found out that Dostoevsky had a hand in the mimic incident, he had begun to hold a grudge. Unfortunately, there weren't too many opportunities for him to mock him, but he didn't expect to have the chance to mock himself from a parallel world in front of the original. He couldn't help but feel his mood lift. Dostoevsky. Ah, that accomplice's brain must have been Ivan's. Clearly someone capable of manipulating rocks. Why wasn't he around during an earthquake? But to end up in Masalt due to amnesia, wasn't his parallel self a bit too unlucky? Dostoevsky remained relatively calm since, after all, that amnesiac fellow wasn't him, and it didn't affect him much. He simply treated it as expanding his horizons. However, the reactions of those monitoring were far from calm. Quick, record this. On X day of X month at X hour X minute, parallel world Dazai Osamu was swapped in. What are they talking about? Discussing how parallel world Dostoevsky lost his memory. The guards were shocked and envious. He even got amnesia. If high IQ criminals like him could get amnesia, we'd save ourselves a lot of trouble. Maybe we should consider putting an ad in for someone with the ability to induce amnesia. Dazai Osamu casually shared a joke, sparking new thoughts in the minds of those in charge of the ability prison. Even if it couldn't be used on Dazai Osamu, who has nullification abilities, getting Dostoevsky to lose his memory wouldn't be bad at all. How envious they were of their counterparts in the other world. It must make guarding him much easier. So, what were you talking about before I arrived? Dazai Osamu sat down, planning to drag the conversation to kill some time. Upon hearing the question, those in charge of the prison must have gotten nervous. In such a strictly guarded facility, procedural requirements take time since no one can be sure if it's a trap to make them lift the cell restrictions. By the time they worked out the procedures, he would have probably already returned, so for now, he intended to relax as much as possible without considering the feelings of others. Dostoevsky wasn't bothered by the sudden change of conversation partner. After all, once the original Dazai-Osamu disappeared from this world, he could no longer influence the outside world, which was actually a good thing for him. Thus, Dostoevsky calmly responded, "The previous conversation, he asked me, no matter how I flirt with the cafe's waitress, she won't give in to me. What should I do?" Dazai-Osamu pondered for a second. "That certainly is a problem. What did you reply?" "Make her lose her livelihood and place to stay, deceive her family into cutting ties with her, then she should come cling to you." Dazai-Osamu nodded. "I see, too bad that won't work for me." Among the guards, some were hurriedly writing reports, others were searching for the special situations handling guide, while some were still watching the conversation between the two prisoners. At this moment, someone in the group suddenly whispered, "Douchebag." With someone starting it, the rest couldn't help but follow suit. "Yeah, definitely a douchebag. The poor waitress. But he doesn't seem to plan to use it." Those who held some hope for Dazai-Osamu were quickly disappointed. Dazai-Osamu, having clearly heard Dostoevsky's answer and understood what kind of advice it was, still added a new question. If the person in question doesn't have any family, if everyone close to them has long since died, if they casually get middle-class tickets without ever worrying about money, what should I do then? Dostoevsky. This level of detail, there's definitely a clear target in mind. The Dazai-Osamu from that parallel world really is completely different from the one in this world. It was obvious that he's the type who'd be forever single. "You're seriously asking this question?" Dostoevsky's hollow smile even became a bit subtle. Moreover, he even consulted him, suggesting that person was truly difficult to win over. "Just for reference, of course." Dazai-Osamu said casually, "After all, there's no one suitable to discuss this with around me, plus asking you, you wouldn't run to my world and announce it everywhere, you're the perfect person to ask." As for whether Dostoevsky would lead him into a trap, Dostoevsky wouldn't do anything so meaningless because he definitely wouldn't fall for it. Stumped, Dostoevsky considered for a moment. "Savior? He doesn't need my rescuing. Threat? By the time the threat is carried out, I'd probably already be dead. Although I might die at any moment now anyway." Even Dostoevsky was curious about who Dazai-Osamu had his eyes on. "Did you confess already? How did they refuse?" Dazai-Osamu said, "They're not in the mood for a double suicide at the moment, doesn't seem genuine." Dostoevsky. "Your confession is inviting them for a double suicide?" The guards stared in disbelief. Why are these two high IQ criminals talking about such things? Don't let your guard down, maybe there's some hidden signal or code. Record everything. The supervisor made an effort to justify them, raising the stakes, but they kept at it. "Find an ability user who can manipulate hormones and make her fall in love with you," Dostoevsky suggested, an idea far too innocent compared to his answer to the waitress. Dazai-Osamu wasn't a fool, he could clearly see through Dostoevsky's thoughts, he just wanted to make fun of him. After all, his ability nullifies others, and if he used this method, he'd probably never be able to touch the other. But... "Oh, you did remind me of something." Dazai-Osamu mused, "I guess I should thank you for that. Chatting with you has been very fruitful, I think I know what to do now." Dostoevsky. Though unsure what insight Dazai-Osamu gleaned from his reply, the topic thankfully passed. Talking with a lovesick mind was exhausting. When he met the other Dazai-Osamu again, he could tease him with this. Dostoevsky hadn't even finished his thought when pink smoke suddenly reappeared from across. The Dazai-Osamu he knew had returned. How unfortunate. Dostoevsky thought, if only he had stayed away a little longer, it might have been enough time for chaos among those Dazai-Osamu tried to contact. Now, this short period of time probably wasn't enough to have much impact. The returned Dazai was smiling joyfully, clearly having a great time in the other world, and began speaking as soon as he saw his fellow inmate. "I heard that in another world, you were so busy watching the chaos that you ended up giving yourself amnesia. Dostoevsky, do you know that in another world, you are completely love-struck?" "Of course I know. This Dazai-Osamu thought for a moment and sighed, in so many worlds, only I'm a good person. Dostoevsky. Upon hearing this, Dostoevsky immediately thought to himself. Looks like he's doing something bad again. Just like Dostoevsky's thoughts, Dazai-Osamu, who had crossed over from the prison, instantly picked up on the hint of gossip and, filled with interest, began his questioning. After having already chatted until he was parched with two other Dazai-Osamus, Komaeda Nagito thought for a moment, then took out the recording pen that had been tucked between some books. Actually, I just talked about this topic with the others. Why don't you listen to the recording instead? Armed Detective Dazai had no objections, and he took it, adjusted it a bit, and then, in who knows how fast speed, began listening. The recording pen was originally this world's Dazai-Osamu's idea, not for eavesdropping but simply for a more roundabout way to follow up on matters. Its placement was obvious and wouldn't easily raise suspicion. Naturally, Boss Dazai noticed it right away when he arrived, but he didn't mind. In fact, a lot of what he said, which seemed directed at Komaeda Nagito, was actually intended for the Dazai-Osamu who would later listen to the recording. That was part of Dazai-Osamu's plan. Even if he wasn't present, he could still communicate across worlds with another version of himself. After all, many times, the same words with a different tone could have an entirely different meaning. And if the one speaking was himself, hearing the exact nuance made all the difference, something Komaeda Nagito's recounting could hardly achieve. That being said, while Dazai-Osamu waited for half an hour just now, he didn't bother listening to the recording. Instead, he preferred to listen to Komaeda Nagito's voice. In short, this recording now ended up in the hands of the newly arrived armed detective Dazai. Komaeda Nagito, meanwhile, kept an eye on the time just in case. He wasn't sure how fast the armed detective Dazai had listened, as he had sped through parts. Roughly 4 minutes later, he stopped, having listened to a segment of the half-hour conversation between Komaeda Nagito and this world's Dazai-Osamu. The armed detective Dazai rubbed his chin, handed the recording pen back to Komaeda Nagito, his expression a little complicated. The information in the recording was enormous, especially for someone as intelligent as Dazai-Osamu. The amount of information was even greater. For Oda Saku's sake. The armed detective Dazai pondered subtly for a few seconds and made a decision. I really am too kind-hearted. Komaeda Nagito, who had reopened the recording. Sorry, what did you say? I didn't catch that. The armed detective Dazai grinned cheerfully and said, I was saying, Komaeda-kun, if you're still planning to get married and have kids, you should probably run while you still can. Chapter 84 End. Chapter 85, Female High School Students. Dazai-Osamu had just returned when he saw Komaeda Nagito looking as if he had fallen into his own world. The recording pen in his hand was twirling so fast it left after images. Even when Dazai came back, it still took him half a beat longer than usual to react. Welcome back, Dazai-kun. Komaeda Nagito offered a flawless smile. Shall we continue the experiment? Dazai-Osamu raised an eyebrow and sat down. No rush. What did that guy say just now? Nothing much. Komaeda Nagito put down the recorder. He said it would take half an hour, but if we don't continue, they might not wait any longer. Anyway, it's not something good, so let him wait. I'm not the one in a hurry. Dazai-Osamu wasn't soft-hearted just because the one in the parallel world was still himself. He calmly said, what I'm interested in right now is what I said just now. Komaeda Nagito thought for a few seconds. He was talking about some female high school students, I guess. Dazai-Osamu. He was stunned. What on earth was this imprisoned me talking about? Before Dazai-Osamu could ask further, he saw Komaeda Nagito take the 10-year bazooka and send him into another world. As soon as he opened his eyes, he found himself standing in the alley outside Lupin's bar. Fine. Since he was here already, Dazai-Osamu simply walked in the direction of Lupin's. It doesn't seem like he's going to run. Let's give him a bit of time. From Komaeda Nagito's reaction, Dazai-Osamu could roughly guess what the other him might have said. But what was the situation with the female high school students, and why bring them up? Was it because of love? Filled with deep doubts, Dazai-Osamu entered Lupin's bar and saw Oda Sakanosuke, who looked just like the one from his world, sitting at the bar drinking. Maybe because of his assassin instincts, Oda Sakanosuke glanced up as soon as Dazai-Osamu entered. Then his body language instantly conveyed a sense of alertness. Oda Sakanosuke had met Dazai-Osamu before and knew that he was the leader of the Port Mafia. But that time they met. It was strange. He simply aimed his gun at an enemy like usual, but the other party gave him a face that looked like he was about to cry, making him feel as if he'd committed some unforgivable sin. Later, he thought back on it, especially recalling some odd things the other had said. He hadn't taken them seriously at the time, but the more he thought about them, the more restless he felt. But he never saw Dazai-Osamu again. Well, it's not like it's easy to just run into the leader of the Port Mafia. He's made waves in Yokohama, and those who wanted to assassinate him could probably fill up Yokohama harbor. Ultimately, why the other came to see him the last time was still an unsolved mystery. So when Oda Sakanosuke saw Dazai-Osamu again now, he didn't instinctively draw his gun. Instead, his reflexes just made him more cautious. But the next moment, Oda Sakanosuke realized something was off. The leader of the Port Mafia, didn't he look younger than last time? Was it his younger brother? Hey, Oda-saku. Dazai-Osamu didn't care what kind of relationship Oda Sakanosuke and his other self had in this world. He simply acted at his own pace. Mind if I sit here? Oda Sakanosuke looked at this more lively Dazai-Osamu, younger than the one he'd met before, and nodded. Sure. Thanks. Dazai-Osamu sat down, asking for a proper glass of alcohol instead of some strange solution. Then, smiling, he said to Oda Sakanosuke, "Did you meet me before?" Oda Sakanosuke hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "You seem younger than last time." Probably because time isn't synchronized between parallel worlds, Dazai-Osamu said directly. "Did he tell you about the parallel worlds?" Oda Sakanosuke stayed silent for a moment before slowly saying, "Yes. I didn't believe him." "Oh, do you believe it now?" Dazai-Osamu asked, full of interest. He was different from the leader of this world. In his world, Oda Sakanosuke wasn't just alive and well but was also his close friend. Compared to Oda Sakanosuke, Komaeda Nagito gave him far more psychological stress. Therefore, in front of the Oda Sakanosuke of this world, Dazai-Osamu was very casual. After all, if anything went wrong, he could always go back and be comforted by his Oda-saku. Half believing, half doubting. Oda Sakanosuke said honestly, "When he saw me last time, his attitude was strange, but there was indeed no ill intent. When I thought back on it, I figured I should probably have listened to him a bit more." "Okay, I think I roughly know what you guys talked about." Dazai-Osamu then asked, "Assuming parallel worlds really do exist, want to hear about how things turned out in my world? The technology isn't that stable, and I could be sent back at any time. That coward wouldn't dare come back and endure it again, so I'd better explain things quickly." Oda Sakanosuke did not refuse. And so, Dazai-Osamu happily explained everything about his side. When he spoke about the mimic incident, Oda Sakanosuke was 80% convinced. By the time he finished, Oda Sakanosuke almost completely believed him. "And that's it. Right now, I'm on the run, staying at another friend's place." "Oh right, in my world, you're still studying under Natsume Soseki, learning how to write. Your editor says you're a future star of literature, and that friend of ours is also Natsume Soseki's disciple." Since there wasn't a Komaeda Nagito in this world, there was no harm in telling Oda Sakanosuke everything. Dazai-Osamu spoke freely. "Komaeda-kun really is indifferent, ah." "No, it's not even indifference, he's not proactive and doesn't take responsibility. I think he understands but is just pretending to be clueless." Listening to this Dazai-Osamu's complaints about his friend, Oda Sakanosuke unconsciously relaxed. He even joined in, if there's any misunderstanding between friends, it's better to talk it out clearly. Sometimes, being too forceful can backfire. Dazai Osamu complained, Komaeda-kun is too much like me. The difference was that he'd run away at the earliest possible moment, and once he'd made up his mind, he had no intention of changing. But Komaeda-kun's avoidance seemed more on and off. Almost every time when he felt, continuing on like this isn't so bad either, Komaeda-kun would waver a bit. That's why Dazai Osamu was so happy when Komaeda-kun actively chose to abandon his luck's decision and try contacting him again. Then what about a drink? Oda Sakanosuke looked at the glass in his hand and said, things said when drunk, he might forget it when he woke up. Although Komaeda-kun is a minor, that isn't a bad idea. If things really don't work out, I'll consider it. Oda Sakanosuke paused for a moment. A minor, huh? Then maybe it's better not to drink. But strictly speaking, this Dazai Osamu wasn't old enough to drink either. Saying that felt a bit strange. Dazai Osamu laughed, don't worry, I'll use this trick cautiously. Oda Sakanosuke. It didn't sound very trustworthy, but this was his friend's counterpart from another world, so maybe it was best to trust him more. Dazai Osamu tapped the glass with the ice inside. That's about it. The rest you guys can discuss when he gets back. Sigh, I never thought I'd be the type to resolve things peacefully. If it weren't for him wanting to confirm things regarding the book, and the fact that Boss Dazai was someone extremely safe who wouldn't trap him in that area, he wouldn't have bothered smoothing things out between Boss Dazai and Oda Sakanosuke. Ugh, while he's running around busy in this world, could the other one be dragging him down in his own world? Boss Dazai sneezed. Komaeda Nagito immediately offered a tissue. Are you catching a cold? Come to think of it, you don't look too well. You should rest properly. Otherwise, if you collapse due to health reasons right before accomplishing something, wouldn't that be too despairing? Thank you. Boss Dazai accepted the tissue, smiling lightly, though I think someone is probably bad-mouthing me behind my back. I'm in pretty good health. Komaeda Nagito observed his thin figure, saying nothing. Boss Dazai chuckled and asked, let's continue. Where were we? Oh, right, the female high school students. Ah, right. Komaeda Nagito said, in simple terms, it was about two high school girls who were very close. One of them got a boyfriend, and the other, out of jealousy, killed the guy. Boss Dazai nodded thoughtfully. These two high school girls weren't in love, but their friendship was so intimate that one couldn't stand the other having a lover. Is that the example that I brought up? Yes. Komaeda Nagito sighed, thinking about it carefully. This situation isn't all that uncommon. I already encountered such close relationships among classmates in middle school, but I could never imagine Dazai-kun saying he'd stop me from finding a girlfriend or anything like that. It's too much, although I never intended to get married or have children anyway. He wasn't really eager to bring disaster upon some innocent girl. What if he ended up dying? What would happen then? Ahem, Boss Dazai couldn't hold back and almost burst into laughter, quickly coughing a few times. Friendship can also have possessiveness, especially since you two are of similar age, with no siblings. He'll naturally be more attached to you. It's normal. In the end, there's never been any government regulation on what friendship should be like, right? As long as you don't feel uncomfortable, it's fine to just go along with what you're used to. Komaeda Nagito nodded. But if Dazai-kun wants to get married and have children, I wouldn't stop him. As a friend, Komaeda-kun, you really are doing a great job. Ah, I even envy him for having such a friend like you. It's truly touching. Boss Dazai praised him while suppressing his laughter. Looks like hammering the notion of friendship to death like this, that other me really is a good person. Chapter 85 End.